See, I talk about Dom sub dynamics from a perspective of this. And when I give my definition, I've never heard anyone else give this definition. So this is something that's just exclusive to me right here, right? So a dominant is the primary giver of pleasure, the secondary receiver of pleasure, right? The primary giver, secondary receiver. And a submissive is the primary receiver of pleasure, right? The secondary giver of pleasure, right? But let's flip it. A dominant is the primary receiver of control and the secondary giver of control. The submissive is the primary giver of control and the secondary taker. What does this mean? What does this mean? So as a dominant, you have to have discipline. You have to have emotional discipline. You have to have leadership skills. These things require discipline. These things require you having control over your emotions. These things require you to have control, right? You know, just like if you're having sex with a woman, right? You have to be able to control your nut to where she gets hers first, right? And another aspect of it is this. A man shouldn't deal with a woman on a basis of saying, this is the most attractive woman I can get. This is the best pussy I can possibly get. So this needs to be the woman I need to be with. She's so beautiful. I just need to be with her. If that's your mindset, you a simp. You have no masculinity. If what makes you so excited about a woman is just the fact that she's attractive, then you are emotional. You are thinking about pleasure over thinking about logic. You're thinking about, and when I say pleasure, I don't mean just the amount of pleasure. And I mean it like this. If you're a dominant, chances are a dominant, when you get to a certain level of dominant, the focus to a certain extent is going to become giving pleasure through penetration, right? And this is for people who are into this type of thing, right? So these are dom sub dynamics. So as a man, if you're the dominant, a woman who's truly submissive, which she's going to get to the point where she's going to go into something called subspace. She's going to give up control because being penetrated is a very vulnerable position. And when she gives up control, she's going to have orgasm being penetrated. Guess what? The same thing eventually happens if you go all the way over into being submissive as a man. If you go all the way over into be feminine and submissive as a man, chances are you're either going to be gay, right? Or bisexual, right? Or you're going to be getting pegged, right? You know, there's a certain vulnerability that comes with allowing yourself to be penetrated. And guess what? The male G-spot is in his ass, right? Dudes in this space, they don't want to talk about that stuff. I ain't saying doing that shit. I'm saying if you're feminine and submissive with somebody, eventually you're going to get to that place where the penis or the clitoris is not going to be your primary focus of where you want to receive pleasure. Because it's not as vulnerable. It's something that is cosmetic. It's something that's on the surface level of your body, right? It's something that extends from you. I know the clitoral legs, all that shit. The clitoral body is, you know, behind the vulva. Listen, I know my anatomy. I probably know my anatomy when it comes to female sexuality better than you do, right? So if there's any women on here talking about, well, he don't know what he's talking about. All right, cool. Don't, you know, come talk to me after you've had not only clitoral orgasms, but after you've had G-spot orgasms, A-spot orgasms, O-spot orgasms, cervical orgasms, you know, from penetration alone. Once, not clitoral from penetration alone. Well, you can get those from penetration alone too, but that's a little bit different. That's just her rubbing it against your body or you rubbing it when you're in it. But once you've had all of those, right? Then come talk to me about female sexuality, since you know so much more about your body because you're a woman, okay? Okay? After you have those experiences, think about the dynamic you had in those relationships, the man's mindset to how he treated you sexually, his dominance, his aggression, maybe his size, maybe your arousal level, maybe your attraction to him, maybe your willingness to give up and relinquish control and give that control over to him. After you've experienced that, then you come back to me. And then we can have that conversation. And if you have a different reason as to the things that created that feeling for you and gave you the ability to have those experiences, while the majority of women, from 60% to 11% of women are unable to have vaginal orgasms from penetration, you know, there's a reason. Let me know if there's a different reason that is the difference between those two things, that you could find some consistency in those points as to what was the difference between what and what happening. Once you can do that, come to me and we can have a real conversation. Well, listen, we can get on live or we can make some content, and we can really have a conversation about female sexuality and female anatomy. But I'm gonna get back to the point. So when you get to the point, if you're very submissive as a man, you got to relinquish control. And when you relinquish control fully, you get to the position where you want to be penetrated. Your penis being stimulated is no longer enough. You want somebody to open you up so you can feel vulnerable. And that's the same thing that happens with a woman who is feminine and submissive. There's a way that sexuality is attached to this when it comes to overall relationship dynamics, right? There's a way that that sex is attached to those things. It's not completely separate. Like, love and sex are separate, and they can be integrated, right? Emotion and sex are separate, but they can be integrated. And how you view somebody sexually is going to affect the emotions and the way that you feel about the individual and the dynamic of your relationship, right? So why is a dominant the secondary receiver of pleasure? It's not that you're not having this person please you. It's not that they don't desire to please you. It's not that they can't give you the best pleasure that you've ever had. It's that the pleasure and where you're going to receive it from primarily is going to be from your dick or your clit, something that's homologous to, the dick and clit are homologous to each other. The effect that it has on somebody, and yes, I know you can have a great effect on a woman sexually through giving her oral sex. I love to eat pussy. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about don't do it. Like, I'm someone who kind of stands in the middle of this thing right here. It's like, let's say you got Mr. BOA, and he talks about a dominant man doesn't eat a woman's pussy. I don't agree with that, right? I don't agree with that. But what I will say is if the foundation of your sexual compatibility is the fact that you eat pussy good, then you're not truly compatible in a dynamic, dom sub dynamic type of way. You might be the most compatible she's been with somebody so far. You know what I mean? You could be giving a woman the best dick that she's had thus far, but that doesn't mean that you're truly at that level yet. So when we're talking about dom sub dynamics, when I say that the dom is the primary receiver of control, you have to have self-control to not overly hurt the individual. You have to have control over your emotions. You have to have control over a lot of things. Another thing is they have to be willing to relinquish control as a submissive. You have to be willing to relinquish control, because some of the things that are dominant go inside of your boundaries. They push them. They push those boundaries. They push those limitations. They push your social programming and how you think you're supposed to be, because society pushes this narrative that relationships are always equal, right? So it's going to push those things. You have to be able to be stretched, and you got to be lubricated to be stretched. And that's why you're the primary receiver of pleasure, because there's pleasure in giving up control. There's pleasure in looking at someone and viewing them as above you. There's pleasure in having someone who you view as an authority, or someone who you value highly, or somebody who you're highly attracted to and highly desire, wanting to interact with you. That to a certain extent, there's something called you want them to own you, right? In regular interactions between people, like on a friend level, you don't want somebody to own you. You know what I mean? You want to keep your autonomy. You still have some autonomy. You still have some agency, but you want to keep your agency. You want to keep your autonomy and protect your boundaries. Because you don't want every single person that you meet or interact with being able to change or shape things about who you are as a person. And oftentimes what people do is when they don't have one person who they can be submissive with, or a structure or something they can be submissive with, what they'll do is this: they will just become a people pleaser, and then they'll spread out all these different places that they want validation from. And by spreading out all these different places that they want validation from, what that person can do is cause themselves to become a people pleaser. A nice guy, a nice girl, something like that. You know what I mean? You know, when you becomes that, you're submissive, but you're thinking about what society wants you to do. You're thinking about what the groups that you belong to think is acceptable. But when you're dominant, you're going out into a space and you're creating it. You're shaping your environment like a dick. A dick, it shapes its environment. When you're dominant, like I said in another video, dominant masculine energy is like a dick. So if you're a man, think about a dick. If you're a woman, think about a dick. What would a woman typically consider to be some good dick, or a dick that she would want to dominate her? Typically, it's going to be one that's larger than average, right? So fitting in with everybody and being what goes along with what everybody wants is not typically going to create the most dominant effect. You want to be hard, right? Hard and something that has, not dry. not brittle. You have a little bit of flexibility to it, right? But at the same time, you're hard. You got some size to you. You got some girth to you as a person, to your personality. And you're deep. You go deep in that motherfucker, right? You're always trying to penetrate your environment. You're always trying to penetrate the situation and go deeper into it. And then the environment that you go into, it shapes itself around you. That's what happens when you're dominant. You go into an environment, or you go into a field, you go into a field of study, you go into a mindset, you go into an ideology. And instead of trying to conform yourself to what you think is bigger than yourself, you go into that environment, and that environment starts to form itself to you. It clings to you, right? And see, that's what femininity is. See, a lot of times women are afraid of being simps, right? Women are afraid of being pick-me's. That's fucking stupid. That's just being submissive, unless you're being a nice girl, right? And just doing what you think you got to do. But when you really feel that way, like this man is so special or something like that, this man is different, this man sticks out, this man stands out, he goes in, then your mindset is you're going to want to cling to that a little bit. If you fight that too much, you lose. You see what I'm saying? If you go out of your way to fight that, you lose. When you get in there, and that's some tight pussy, right? You're emotional, right? Which means that you don't try to go out of your way to make decisions from a place of logic. Emotional, that's wetness, right? Emotional, wetness, those things go hand in hand, right? You might cry sometimes. When a woman get real submissive with you during sex, sometimes the pleasure alone will make her cry. And another reason why you have to be able to understand the difference between being feminine and social program and your social programming, and being submissive versus getting into your social programming and thinking things from that type of perspective is this. From a perspective of your social programming, certain things that will happen in a dominant sub dynamic are things that will go against conventional ideas of consent. It's things that will go against conventional ideas of what respect is. It'll go against conventional ideas of what somebody caring for you is. It'll go against conventional ideas of communication. Because you've already accepted that what this person wants, that's what you're trying to do. And if you've already accepted that you want them more than you want to do a specific thing, then whatever they want to do, you're excited to do it because you're with them. And when you think about that, you're like, well, because they're with them, you take a look at that particular situation, right? You take a look at that particular situation and you say that I don't mind them taking me somewhere I've never been or doing things that stretch me. It's just like, I look at it like this. As a dominant, your program is like your martial art. You're a sensei. Your submissive is your student. She has to be indoctrinated into your program. She has to enroll herself into your dojo, which is the relationship, the dynamic. And when she enrolls herself into your dojo, what happens after that is she starts as a white belt. She starts as a white belt. And what do you do when you're a master in a dojo? There's different ways that masters in dojos work, depending on the difficulty of the martial art and depending on how masculine that environment is. So yes, you can be a feminine dominant to a certain extent, or a socially programmed dominant, and then have certain rules and guidelines that you go about. But sometimes it's gentrified. What is gentrification? Gentrification oftentimes creates the effeminization, right, of institutions in order to fit in with society, in order to make people consumers, right? If a man doesn't think for himself, if a man isn't masculine, if a person isn't masculine and dominant, then whatever other people want, it's going to be pre-selection. And when that pre-selection occurs, you're going to choose based off of the fear of shame or thinking that people are going to give you credit for it because you're not self-assured. So when you go into old school boxing gyms, right, there would be some hard sparring. The coach may have you, it may be hot in there, no AC. You know what I mean? It may be some tough people in there, some felons. Yeah, you go into a real boxing gym, it's gonna be some felons in there. It's gonna be some street niggas in there. It's gonna be some country dudes in there. It's gonna be some military guys in there. There's gonna be some professional boxers in there. See, this is what happens when you go into like a boxing gym. I'm a boxing coach, so I'm speaking like a coach right now. And you can, as a dominant, make certain choices, right, that can make it a little bit more socially acceptable or a little bit more alluring in an advertising type of way. But at the same time, the essence of the hard work, the essence of making that person uncomfortable in the gym so that they grow, the essence of putting them in situations where harm is possible, right? And then teaching them how to navigate those situations is going to be the best preparation. It's going to be the best training, the best learning of that martial art that there can be. If everything is overly safe, then oftentimes a fighter will be training, and then when another fighter comes in from a gym who has a tougher, stricter type of environment that they're in, they're going to get their ass beat, right? They're not going to be able to compete. Now, what is this competition? Now, this is where the competition is, right? You're fighting to win that man. You get what I'm saying? You're fighting to win that man. So you go up through that white belt ranks. That might just be a hookup, or your initial link up, right? But then you get up to higher levels, right? So we might use the martial art. Let's say you at a white belt, right? No. You know what? I'm gonna skip the belts. I'm gonna go to boxing, right? So let's say you're a novice. You're just starting off. You have to learn his program because that's what you're trying to win is him. And the higher you get up in it, the more options of other men you'll have as well. If you're so worried about what if he don't choose you. One, you're enjoying yourself. So you're not doing something you don't want to do because you're enjoying what you're doing. But on the other side, the more higher up you go in his program and things that you learn how to do in order to suit his program, the more masculine and dominant men you will be, and the more men in general who you will be more attractive to, right? So even if you want to deal with a man who's a little bit less masculine and dominant, chances are, even if you don't reach his standard all the way, the things that you learned along the way made it so that your natural way of dealing with him is going to be able to reach the standards of a man who doesn't require as much. Now, he's going to be less masculine and dominant, so you may not be able to feel the same way about him sexually, but at the same time, you're going to be in a position to where when you first meet that man, you're on point for him, for what he wants to do, right? The more masculine and dominant a man is, the more extravagant his vision is, the more tough of an environment he's going to go into, the stronger his game needs to be. So I'm a rapper, I'm a music producer, I'm a boxing coach, I'm a content creator, I'm an actor, I'm a meme lord, right? I'm a blurred content creator. I do a lot of things. With that, as an artist, making music, rapping and making, doing music production and acting and stuff, there's certain shoulders and elbows I will rub with, right? With there being certain shoulders and elbows I will rub with, my game has to be on a certain level to where I've experienced enough to where I can talk to my woman and break down the environment we're going to go into. So if that woman is feminine and submissive, she's going to know how not to be feminine and submissive with anybody else who has below my level of masculine and dominance, or who has the same level or above that level, right? To an extent. Now, that's where love is going to come in. Love is for the difference between you and somebody who's more masculine and dominant, right? So just like a woman can leave you for someone less masculine and dominant, but if they reach a high enough standard for her, what she's learned with them will make her meet his standards, and then they will deal with each other on a little bit closer to an equal basis, right? So it's about how masculine and dominant you want to be. But the issue is that nature, depending on how much a woman loves you or depending on how much she respects and desires you, if you don't reach a certain standard, then if another man comes along who's more masculine and dominant and sexually appealing, she's going to trade up to that because that's her nature. But there's a certain point that you can reach to that if a woman begins to love you and value you emotionally, that a man who's more masculine and dominant is not going to be enough to make up the difference of what she would be losing from dealing with you, right? And I'm just breaking this. This is some real shit down talking about dom sub dynamics. But Let's say when she starts off, she's a novice. That's the fuck buddy, right? Casual hookup. Then she becomes, that's a casual hookup. Then she becomes a amateur, right? Right? She becomes an amateur. She becomes an amateur. Now she's in a position where she's a friends with benefits. You're spending non-sexual time together. You're enjoying each other's company. You may be, cooking together, spending time together. You may go out and do things, right? And then when she graduates beyond that level of the amateurs, that's when she gets to the pros. That's when she's your girlfriend. When she gets to the pros, that's your girlfriend, that's your woman. Either you're in an open situation or you're in a monogamous situation, but you two have decided that you two are primary partners with one another, and she's your primary focus as a woman. When she gets to that place, she's a professional, right? Now, when she gets to the professionals, she gets up, right? And if she gets with your program, she adds value, and then she shows that not only has she mastered the craft of dealing with you, but that she still has ambition to want things to be more. She still has potential to want things to be more. She adds value to your life. How good she is at being feminine and submissive with you is dominant compared to the women around her. She may have her own way, her own style of being on your program to the point where she makes how she treats you better by herself than what you teach her, right? She improves the quality of your life in that type of way. Then that woman becomes a champion. And when becomes a champion, she's your wife. Or that's your, whether that's on paper or whether that's in your heart or whether that's just an agreement that you have, you're living together, that is your wife. That is your woman, and she belongs to you now. But she is a champion. There's a certain prestige that comes with that. But if she doesn't have enough in her cup to be able to do the training, right? If she doesn't have enough security within herself, if she doesn't have enough desire for you and respect for you within herself, if she goes to that gym and says, you know what, I don't really like the environment here, it's too tough here, it's too rough, then she gonna leave the gym. If she goes to your gym to train and she's like, you know what, it's too hot in here, or they spar too hard. And I'll say this right here too. There are certain things that you can do as a man that are masculine and dominant, that can hurt a woman, and you got to know where she's at. But really, it's more so about knowing what your program is, right? If you're not desirable enough for how difficult your program is, then it's going to be too difficult for all the women that you come across, right? So we're going to look at it like this. Yes. So an example of that would be hard sparring in the gym. Some people do get brain damage behind that. You get what I'm saying? Some people do get brain damage behind the hard sparring, but that doesn't mean necessarily that hard sparring is wrong all the time. What it really means is this: they weren't trained to have defense good enough to deal with that, right? And either they don't have the talent or they don't have this training and the skills to be able to do that. And when you put somebody in an environment that they don't have the talent or the skills for, they're going to get hurt, right? So that's like when the cup is low, right? When the cup is low. But you have to have enough in your cup, enough security, enough desire, enough interest, enough value for that individual, and enough comfort and fortitude within yourself, security and bravery. You have to be brave to be a submissive, right? To be able to go into that environment and do it in the first place. And then when you go into that environment, you're training. If you start to really love it, which is intrinsic desire, intrinsic reward, then you're training. As you're training, you're investing things, right? But things are getting poured back into you. You're learning things, right? You're getting training. As you go up through those ranks, as you're working out in the gym, some may be doing better than a lot of other people who are around. So you know what happens when you're doing better? The coach spends more time with you. When you're showing promise, the coach is going to spend more time with you. They may do private lessons. They may take up extra time with you, right? They may take up extra time with you. And if they get to the point where they can tell that you're ready or you really want to be ready, they'll let you know what you have to do to get to the next level, right? That's not transactional. That's them letting you know what you have to do to get to the next level, to be able to handle what you're the journey you're trying to embark on. When they say that you're ready, you go ahead and you go for what you want to go for, right? You go for it. right? And then when you get to that point, you start climbing up the ranks. When you make mistakes, you fix it. You know, when you make mistakes, you fix it. You go back to the gym. You know what I mean? You study. You know, you study what you're learning. When you go home, you shadow box. You're thinking. That's like a submissive thinking about the best way to be submissive with you, and you just put some thought and some time and energy into those things, and you can do all those things while having a job, right? Now it's easier to do those things when you don't, but if you have the desire to do it, you can do it. You get what I'm saying? So, and then while you're doing these things, you go, but it also depends on, like I said, how much is in your cup. It depends on how much is in your cup. If your job takes so much of your time and your energy that you don't have time to embark on that journey, and you don't have enough interest or desire to do those things, then you're going to run yourself thin. And then you're going to start either skipping gym, or, you know, not going to the gym consistently, or you're going to stop going, right? Or you're going to get hurt in the gym because you got off of your game. So as you continue to go through those ranks and you continue to do better and improve, that's how you keep going up. So this is also how Dom-Sub dynamics, you know, relate to relationships, you know, in general. Because a lot of people like to take BDSM and Dom-Sub relationships and then try to put it in this cookie cutter gentrified type of box where they have all these different words that they have to use for everything. And I like using different words because I explain things, but some of these things don't have to be explained to a woman using these words for her to understand them. A woman can experience all of these things with you without knowing any of this shit. She just feels that way about you. You know, if you have to convince a woman too logically to be on your program, she doesn't feel that way about you. It's not something that's occurring naturally. Now, she may be able to get there, but you're going to have to work on yourself. You get what I'm saying? You're going to have to work on your program. You got to work on it. But what happens is when this is, you know, how Dom-Sub dynamics are related to relationships is, you know, if you're equals already, you can't really go through that process, right? Now, equal isn't about money. Equal isn't about inherent value, right? Equal isn't about career success. Equal isn't about saying that you two aren't of equal value as human beings. Equal is just about saying who has the vision. So if you have two separate visions and you're always having to compromise or having a power struggle because certain things are just very important to you, then what's going to happen is you're going to be slowed down in your advancement going forward in life. You're going to be slowed down. It's about being efficient in life as well. If you always have to deal with arguments in your relationships, disagreements, and you're not able to just enjoy each other, then one, in the relationship itself and in life itself, both of you are going to be slowed down, distracted, and instead of working with each other to be able to move forward even faster as a unit, now you're having to work on dealing with things with each other all the time. You get what I'm saying? So that's why it's important to deal with a woman who's feminine and submissive with you, right? Just like if you're prematurely integrated, what's going on is that before that Dom-Sub dynamic is established, before a woman decides that your program is something she's willing to follow, before a woman feels that way about you sexually, to where that idea of her sex being value that she's adding to you and placing a price on it, if you're not at that place and then you decide to go to the next level with that woman, then you're going to be too invested to walk away at times when you need to walk away. Right? You're going to be too invested to walk away in times you need to walk away. And she's also not going to respect you because you didn't plan things properly. And she's not going to respect you because your sex is casual. Because your sex is transactional. It's pouring out of your cup. She's not going to respect you, and she's not going to desire you to the extent that she could if you did things better. Or you're not going to know that she just doesn't have a capacity to do things with you in this type of dynamic. So I think it's important to have that. You get what I'm saying? I think it's important to have that. But this is just how Dom-Sub dynamics relate to relationships. This is Brody. I'm out.